Hello, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining a Rewild Long Island webinar, How the World Makes Leftovers Taste Like New by Jacquelyn Ottman. I'm so happy to see you all today. Jacquelyn Ottman is a culinary historian, past chair of the Manhattan Solid Waste Advisory Board. She's a native New Yorker and an advocate for zero food waste. Her focus, using global food cuisines to help inspire home and professional cooks to discover the joy in reinventing leftovers. She's also the founder of WeHateToWaste.com. With attention now focused on cutting down on food waste, it's the perfect time to take a new look at the power to transform leftovers. Jacquelyn Ottman will show us how to save money and cut down on climate emissions by reinventing what's left over from last night's dinner into something new and delicious. So without further delay, I hand it over to Jackie O.
Aha. Thank you so much to Yash and to Dee for that nice introduction and for inviting me tonight. And thank you everybody for taking time out of your busy schedules to check into this webinar. I'm very excited to share my insights and ideas with you all at Rewild Long Island, because you really do so much for the natural environment. And so I think you'll appreciate what I'm trying to do here, but also you all have issues out on Long Island with closing landfills and especially and climate change and as well, and some food insecurity issues in certain areas. So I'm hoping that this can be very inspiring to you. And of course, with the holidays just around the corner, it's a perfect time to be thinking about how to make the most of your leftovers. So let me ask you, how many of you have favorite traditions around holiday leftovers? Perhaps it's a soup that you look forward to making, or a casserole, or maybe you like to gather friends and neighbors together to share your leftovers. So please feel free to put those traditions and favorites in the chat, things that you look forward to. And maybe some of you are looking to cook up something different this year for the holidays. So hopefully you can pick up some ideas from the rest of us. So I'm going to put, as Tiash mentioned, I'm going to share some particular inspiration from home cooks around the world who literally for centuries have been making 7 now very beloved dishes for transforming their own leftovers. Of course, throughout time, no one could waste even a morsel of food. And this challenged home cooks like all of us to make sure their families were fed meals that were not only nutritious, but also, of course, delicious. But I'm not going to stop there. Leftovers are way too important for us just to focus on what goes on in our own kitchens. So I'm going to conclude by sharing 3 of my best wishes for programs and policies that can help make our food culture a lot more leftovers friendly. It was leftovers friendly once before for a long, long time. And hopefully we can make it more leftovers friendly once again. And hopefully these wishes match some of yours and could spur some new initiatives on Long Island. But first, start with a little more context. Food waste is a huge problem now in the US as it is around the world. The US government and the UN are issuing very far reaching policies and initiatives now for cutting down on food waste, with the long term goal of making sure there's enough food and fertile cropland for future generations. Of course, we all got a taste of food shortages during the pandemic. I spent a big part of the pandemic out on Shelter Island myself, and it wasn't fun having those food shortages at the IGA. Now, of course, food security is even worse a problem, and food prices are continuing to climb. Yet, 1/3 of all the food that we buy at the supermarket winds up in the trash. And that doesn't count all the food that's left on the fields lost in distribution, or thrown away by supermarkets and restaurants. Those ancient home cooks didn't worry about climate change way back when, but we do now. So these days, when our food gets to a landfill, it degrades into methane, a pollutant that is up to 80 times more potent as a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that. So, who's throwing away all this food? The answer may surprise you. It's actually us, all of us. Check out the big green wedge on the pie chart on the right. It shows that just looking at New York City, among the three different cities that the NRDC, the Natural Resources Defense Council, researched, over half, or 54% of all food waste that was thrown out at that period came from homes. And that's more food than was thrown away by restaurants, cafeterias, catering halls, and all the other places represented by all the other colors in the rest of the pie chart that prepare food to eat outside the home combined. So it's households that are throwing away the bulk of food waste. It won't surprise you to know that one of the biggest drivers of this food wasted by homes is leftovers. Of course, restaurants have professionals in their kitchens who know how to turn what's left over into something usable. It's called the fancy soup du jour, and they have a strong economic incentive to do so. But that's not always the case in our own homes, whether we're cooking too much for company, over ordering on takeout, or stashing uneaten food in the fridge, but never wind up eating it. So let's take a deeper dive into this leftovers situation. As you can see on the chart on the left, it starts to add up to real money, though. Nearly $2,000 of what the average American household spends on food waste winds up as waste. Now look on the chart on the right, and you'll see that almost a quarter of this, about 23%, represents perfectly good food that was thrown out in the form of prepared foods and leftovers. So, what we can save by eating up the leftovers is immense. And that cost will only go up, of course, as prices continue to rise and as we eat greater and greater percentages of our food in restaurants and via delivery. Now, to paraphrase Wikipedia, leftovers can be defined as the edible remains of a meal, stored with the intention of eating them later. So, we're talking about what's left in the casserole after supper's over, but I think the definition should also include the raw ingredients that didn't make it into the mixing bowl. You know, that big bunch of celery or what's left in the can of tomato paste when the recipe just called for a tablespoon. And that's for those of us who cook. These days, we're spending more money on eating in restaurants and ordering in than on food than we're preparing at home. I think it's like 54%, 46% national average. So leftovers also need to encompass the food we bring home in a doggy bag, as well as any prepared foods left over from a food delivery. Now, let's talk about that qualifier, edible remains of a meal. You might ask, what about composting, Jackie? Why not? Composting is getting a lot of attention these days. Here in the city, it's now mandatory. Have you heard this news? That all 8.5 million residents must now collect their food scraps for composting or bioenergy. Now, this is a good thing because composting creates an important soil amendment and biofuels can be used to heat homes. But is composting the best possible way to dispose of our leftovers? Not really. According to the EPA's wasted food scale, this new U-shaped diagram has replaced the triangle you may be more familiar with. Composting is just a step or two above landfilling for food disposal. Are you surprised to see how far down it is on the other side of that lighter green part of the list? To be clear, composting is good, but it's best for food that is inedible or avoidable food waste, unavoidable food waste, because you have to, there's no use for it. But it's a very different case for food that's edible or food waste that's avoidable, otherwise avoidable. Edible food should be eaten. It should never see a trash can or a compost bin. As you can see on the darker side of the of this U-shaped wasted food scale, you really want to prevent edible food from going to waste. You want all the food that's fit for consumption to fill the bellies, even those of animals, so all that nutrition the food contains can be put to beneficial use. So, my question I asked about 5 years ago is, so how can we encourage people to eat up their leftovers? The world really doesn't lack for ideas, but first we have to get many people over the hurdles. And I'm sure you're familiar with many of these hurdles. Here are a few of the biggest ones. I'm still searching for the specific numbers, but it certainly seems clear from the trends that the moms who now work, the grannies who live across the country instead of across the street, and the teachers who teach computer skills are no longer teaching our kids to cook. Let me ask you, how many young people do you know who think the best way to reheat a pizza is in the microwave? Case closed. Relatably, many Americans don't know how to properly store food so it will last more than a day or two in the fridge. And they also misconstrue date labels, thinking they represent some kind of an expiration date, prompting them to throw perfectly good food away. And then, of course, there's the emotional side of leftovers, the boredom associated with eating the same thing again, fear of getting sick, which could be true, even the shame experienced by some when asking for a doggy bag. Is getting some attention these days. During the pandemic, of course, leftovers were all over social media as well as the morning talk shows. There are lots of celebrity chefs and food writers and TikTokers who still like to talk about how much they love leftovers. But now, with so many more reasons than empty store shelves, we need to turn up the dial, engaging as many cooks as possible with new ways to keep leftovers top of mind. And if we all pitch in, we can make a difference. I personally think the best kind of encouragement we can give to Americans is simply to demonstrate how leftovers can be delicious. I ask you, who ever throws away delicious food? So we need to give people inspiration and tips and tricks for making the leftovers delicious. And so this was my quest I set for myself about 5 years ago. And I came upon a really beautiful source of inspiration. And it's inspiration that abounds from the 7 dishes made around the world with the intention of repurposing leftovers. And so I went on a search around the world and throughout history, and it's where I find the 7 dishes I'll be talking about throughout the rest of this presentation that home cooks have been using to transform their own leftovers for centuries. These dishes represent the perfect inspiration since Americans are always looking to try new foods, especially food from other cultures, as well as food these days that remind us of our own native food cultures. Anybody hungry to learn more? Let's take a deep dive into each one of these 7 dishes before concluding with the 7 wishes. So, starting in ancient times, food culture in India, China, and the Middle East developed specific dishes for rolling over the leftover bits of this and that and the odds and ends from last night's dinner and transforming it into something entirely new for tomorrow's breakfast or lunch. Over the centuries, many of these inventive dishes have spread literally around the world, taking on the flavors and textures and spices of regional specialties. And with meat being pretty rare over the centuries, many of these dishes adapt well to vegetarian and vegan options, which is something we want to do if we're thinking about the climate. So, what are these dishes? You actually know them very, very well. They're the savory pies and tarts that represent the perfect spot to tuck in the leftover chicken and veggies, the fried rice that the Chinese have ingeniously been using for centuries to repurpose day-old rice, the savory soups and stews that can be recharged seemingly forever. There are also the flavorful curries that were first created in India that have now found their way onto more tables in the UK than bangers and mash. True fact. There are also the grain bowls, beloved by monks for balance, that the health conscious among us eat today to stay fit. There are also the omelets and the frittatas that are chock full of leftover meats and veggies that we happily consume with a mimosa or two for a laid back brunch. And finally, it's the breaded fish cakes, golden fried with an egg on top, that make a great meal anytime. You have likely enjoyed every one of these 7 dishes. But what you may not have tried yet are the many exciting permutations of these dishes that have sprung up around the world. That's the news I want to share with you through this presentation, starting with soup. The scorch marks on the ceramic pot that you see on the bottom left suggest that soups may have been invented in China during an ice age as long ago as 20,000 BC. Perhaps starting as a poor man's stew without much more in the bowl than some weak flavorings, soup is now universal. It is consumed by young and old, the healthy and the sick. Every food culture around the world has soups of all kinds, colors, and textures. And each one has its own soup culture, the traditions, the occasions, the etiquette, and the accoutrement for serving and eating soup, even TV characters like Seinfeld's Soup Nazi. Soup is ubiquitous. It's featured on menus from diners to five-star restaurants. It's waiting for you on a supermarket shelf, ready to eat from a can, prepared in a cup, or from a cube, a pouch, or a packet. Soup has even gone to the moon, and of course, it's the backbone of soup kitchens because they are at once so economical and nutritious. From those humble origins so long ago, today there are hot soups and cold soups, cream soups. There are soups for breakfast like Japanese miso soup, cold soups that are perfect for a summertime lunch like gazpacho, even soups for dessert like Hungarian sour cherry medvedesh. I think I pronounced that correctly. If you want to mix things up a bit in your own kitchen, you can turn the remains of a roasted chicken into Peru's green chicken soup called aguadito de palo. It's flavored with cilantro and topped with lime. 2 soups that are popular in the city these days are Vietnamese pho, a meal in a bowl, and Ukrainian borscht, made, of course, from beets. Soup's versatility makes it a great dish to use up any ingredient you have on hand. Just ask world famous chef Jacques Pepin, whose recipe for fridge soup is his own go to for a cold winter's night. By the way, to help you make his fridge soup yourself, along with the others I'm going to show you throughout this presentation, you'll be able to get going to give you a link at the end, and then we'll take you to a free PDF of this recipe and the others I will show you. But you don't need a fancy recipe. Making soup is super easy. Just like the folks in the stone soup fable discovered, you can make soup from just about anything. You simply, 4 or 5 steps, start with a pre-made stock or simply buy broth in a store. Add whatever leftovers you have in the form of protein, vegetables, seasonings. Simmer to reduce and concentrate the flavor. And if you like, you can add a little milk or cream just before serving, or for a more textured result, puree it all in a blender. Now let's turn to another super popular dish that makes it a perfect container for leftovers and a perfect binder for leftovers: eggs. Dishes made from eggs, like omelets in France and frittatas in Italy, have savory as well as sweet roots that trace to ancient Persia and Rome. Typically cooked in a stovetop skillet or baked, eggs act as a binder for the small pieces of meat and veggies that make them taste so good. You can enjoy omelets for breakfast, lunch, brunch, and a light dinner. Now, we have Napoleon to thank for omelets being so popular in France. It is believed that he was served the first known French omelet by an innkeeper in Bessières, France. Immediately enamored, Napoleon requested the innkeeper prepare them for his entire army, and the rest is history. The French pride themselves on omelets that are flat and golden yellow, but their American counterparts, called Denver or Western omelets, are a bit crusty on the outside, and they burst with red peppers, ham, and other hearty and colorful ingredients. Omelets served in the rest of the world have their own distinctive colors, shapes, and sizes. Italian frittatas, as you know, are big and round as the skillet they're baked in. Spain's tortilla de patatas are almost as white as the potatoes they contain. Korea's giran mari is flavored with diced onion, ham, and sesame oil, and rolled before it's cut into pieces. Iran's kuku sabzi. Has anyone ever had kuku sabzi? It's green and herby and sprinkled with bright red cranberries, while Japan's omurice is stuffed with flavored rice and tops with, of all things, a zigzag of ketchup. Now, many restaurants serve special omelets du jour, so I suppose you could enjoy a different omelet every day of the year. For your everyday leftovers, you can try cookbook chef Julia Turshin's customizable chicken sink frittata, featured in her cookbook, Simply Julia. And after a special occasion like the Super Bowl, you can try a leftover game day egg bake of spicy buffalo wings and blue cheese. Rachel Ray is a big frittata fan. She makes frittatas from, of all things, leftover pasta. Why not? Her pasta frittata looks somewhat like a pizza, which she touts is fun, easy to make, and great for any meal. To make a frittata yourself, it's simple. Whisk together some eggs with a little cream and some seasonings, then drop in whatever leftovers you might have on hand and bake it right in the skillet until the eggs have cooked through. Our third dish is grain bowls. It's being reinvented as we speak with a younger, health-conscious eater in mind. Created in Central to East Asia, the ever-adaptable grain bowl traces its roots to the Buddha and later on to monks who would eat a balanced diet from simple ingredients collected in their bowls. Quite reminiscent of today's colorful salads, grain bowls are traditionally served in a simple, wide, flat bowl that shows off the variety of gorgeous textures and colors. Today, grain bowls, of course, are an Instagram favorite. and they're served in youngish restaurants like Chipotle, Dig, Sweetgreen, and other hot restaurant chains. They're eaten for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and they're enjoying a growing following around the health-conscious world, led by celebrity chefs and athletes who enjoy and value their balanced nutrition. It was Martha Stewart who coined the term Buddha Bowl in her 2013 cookbook called Meatless. As you can see here, grain bowls can be made with literally endless variations, such as the ones that many cultures have developed with their local flares. Can you imagine digging into Jamaica jerk chicken grain bowl flavored with mango and lime? There's a Moroccan chicken or lamb grain bowl seasoned with a special Moroccan spice blend. Japanese donbori consists of slices of fish, chicken, or beef sauteed with vegetables, or a Korean bibimbap topped with an egg. Grain bowls for breakfast? Why not? Tomorrow morning, try Gwyneth Paltrow's breakfast grain bowl topped with an egg that's featured in her cookbook. It's all good. Perhaps you've already tried some grain bowls that are trending now in the US, like the coconut quinoa salmon power bowl that LeBron James favors before a game, or a Hawaiian poke bowl inspired by Japanese rice bowls featuring fresh caught raw tuna. Or invent your own. It's easy. The first step in making a grain bowl is to pick a grain base like rice, quinoa, or barley. Then add veggies and any type of protein like meat, fish, legumes, or veggie protein like tofu, falafel, egg, or seitan. Drizzle on a dressing or a sauce and garnish with raw veggies and add some crunch with some panko or nuts. Now let's travel to China. Like the visual in the bottom left corner suggests, it takes a lot of hard work to grow rice. An ancient Chinese proverb warns against wasting even one grain. So it's not surprising that the Chinese developed fried rice over 1900 years ago in the city of Yangzhou in eastern Jiangsu province. There, fried rice is still called chow fan, meaning saute meal. A quick and casual meal, fried rice is made with leftover rice and often other leftover ingredients, including many kinds of protein and some form of veggies, like peas is particularly popular. 100% vegan varieties are possible too. And traditionally, it's all combined in a wok and seasoned with soy sauce. Usually eaten for breakfast or lunch, it's a casual meal. Fried rice is a typical Asian street food facilitated by a wok's high heat and portability. In America, fried rice has a long history stretching back to the California Gold Rush of 1849. The first known appearance on restaurant menus was the one you see here in the bottom right corner from Harlem's Cotton Club. Now, we Americans are not the only ones who can benefit by eating up every grain of rice. Fried rice has been traveling with the Chinese across all other continents too. Now there are countless variations of fried rice, so everyone on the planet can use up not only the day-old rice, but all the tidbits left over from the rest of a meal. Starting with the images up in the top row, examples include Korean kimchi bokimbap, Peruvian arroz chafa, and Cuban arroz frito, and Indian tawa pulao. I'm not sure I pronounced those all correctly. Vegan? No problem. Fried rice can be healthy and satisfying when made from tender vegetables and crispy baked tofu. And you don't even need rice. You can make fried rice from California rice. And if delicacies are your thing, you can also order fried rice spiked with lobster or Wagyu beef. But if you're trying to avoid fried foods altogether, no worries. Top chef Stephanie Izard has a recipe for making fried, quote unquote, fried rice on a baking sheet instead of a wok. So you don't even have to fry it. Now, whether it's a simple dish prepped in the street or in the toniest restaurant, fried rice is pretty simple to make. It just takes 4 steps. You saute some veggies or meat in a skillet or wok, scramble in an egg or two to bind the tidbits together, and then mix in your day-old rice. You can add favorite flavors like soy sauce or sriracha and garnish with cilantro or green onions. Now, let's head back to India and look at their favorite way to repurpose leftovers these days. It's curry. You know curry. It's a stew-like dish consisting of meat, fish, vegetables, or lentils, all cooked in a sauce. But did you know that it originated in India in 2600 BC? Superbly capable of accommodating nearly any kind of leftover, curries can be flavored with spices similar to those in curry powder, which we're all familiar with, which was popularized in the UK. But in India, curries are often made with the more pungent spice blend called garam masala. Thanks to the British, curries have spread around the world and have adapted to local tastes. They have a long, rich tradition in India, of course, so let's start there. Across India, there are numerous regional curries. Starting up at the top center, examples include Goan pork vindaloo, flavored with chilies, garlic, and vinegar, puri masala, packed with boiled potatoes and lots of onions, spices, and lentils, and Punjabi lobia curry that features black-eyed peas. Jamaicans spice up their curry with a spice blend similar to jerk seasoning. In Thailand, they enjoy a red curry with typical flavors of lemongrass, Thai chili, and fish sauce. The Japanese savor their kakushaiji, a sweet curry with a thicker sauce, often containing unique ingredients like, believe it or not, caramelized apples, onions, and even coffee, chocolate, vanilla, butter, and chutney. Curry became popular in the UK because of the large numbers of immigrants from South Asia after World War II, but it's now so ingrained in UK food culture that chicken tikka masala is Britain's national dish. And celebrity chefs create signature dishes. Although its ingredients may sound rather exotic, curry can be somewhat simple to make. Cook your protein or other main ingredients, then add a blend of spices, followed by adding some broth or coconut milk, and add any vegetables. Let them all simmer slowly until the smell is irresistible. You can take some advice from UK celebrity chef Gordon Ramsay and go bold with your holiday leftovers this year. He advises, forget soggy sandwiches and instead opt for a really flavorsome Thai turkey curry, bursting with zingy lemongrass, coriander, and chili. For the vegetable conscious among us, he assures us that his recipe would work equally well with cubes of paneer for a vegetarian option or extra vegetables for a vegan curry. Our 6th dish is savory pies and tarts, those wonderful, comforting dishes baked up with a delectable open or enclosed crust filled with savory meat, fish, poultry, and or vegetable-based fillings. They have a long history stretching as far back as ancient Egypt and the Roman Empire. Thankfully, savory pies eventually migrated west to the US, Australia, and New Zealand, and they still provide us all with a homey, nostalgic comfort food that continues to evolve in delicious and appealing ways. Savory pies are as American as well. Apple pie. First cooked in crusts that were inedible, pies have been served up by Americans as a tasty and comforting way to preserved foods within edible crusts, since our earliest settlers brought their recipes with them from Europe. Now, we Americans tend to enjoy slices of savory pie, but many people in the rest of the world like their pie served in a single portion, handheld and portable. Examples include Spanish empanadas, Greek spanakopita, Middle Eastern fatayers, and Indian samosas. All of these are likely predecessors to our own sandwiches, which didn't come along until 1762. Veggie tarts seem to be having a moment now, presumably because of diet and health trends. They're being boosted by Instagram because they're so photogenic. And one pie, I love this, that's really a tart that all Americans love is, of course, pizza. And like we all know, pizza is a natural container for using up any of our leftovers. One great example is Jeffrey Zacharian's Everything But the Kitchen Sink pizza. Want to make a quick tart? Start with your favorite kind of crust, flaky, crumbly, or even store-bought's okay. Roll it out into a dish and pre-bake it to avoid soggy, undercooked dough. Then arrange your toppings on it and give it another bake. And last but not least, finally, there's fish cakes. Technically speaking, fish cakes are typically made from leftover bits of seafood and typically a white fish like cod or haddock. It's all ground up, combined with a starch like breadcrumbs or mashed potatoes to hold it together, and some other flavorsome ingredients. Then it's all fried to a golden brown. Originating long before McDonald's fish sticks were ever imagined, fish cakes are thought to go back as far as long ago as 4,000 years ago in Asia, arriving in Europe as early as the 1800s. They're especially popular in UK chip shops. Fish cakes made their way to New England, where they helped transform Saturday night's traditional cod dinner into codfish balls for a tasty breakfast. Today, what American can resist Maryland-style crab cakes? Israelis love their gefilte fish, a more finely processed fish cake mixed with matzah or challah that's poached in the skin of the fish. The Scandinavians introduced fish to kids through their fisk frikadelier, a white fish like cod served with a mayonnaise-type sauce. And the Brazilians and Portuguese love their bolinhos de bacalhau, a Portuguese dish made from codfish, potatoes, eggs, parsley, onion, and nutmeg. Finally, in Thailand, the spicy seasoned Thad Mun Pla has an intense flavor due to the mixed-in Thai curry paste and other strong seasonings like fish sauce, chilies, lemongrass, and mackerel lime. With overfishing threatening many fisheries these days, it's absolutely crucial to not let any of this tasty protein go to waste. Thankfully, fish cakes make a great dish for any occasion or meal, and Canadian chef and food waste advocate Christine Tizard loves hers made from leftover salmon and potatoes fried in a skillet. To make fish cakes at home, simply, you know the steps now, mash together cooked fish with some sort of starch like potatoes or breadcrumbs, add an egg to help it bind together, form little patties, and dip them in breadcrumbs or panko and fry them up. And to add some extra protein, you can top them with an egg. There is plenty of inspiration out there for even more variations on these 7 great dishes. Like I said, you can make a different one every single day with whatever leftovers you have on hand. Just check out the numerous cookbooks that can help us explore these resilient creations further. And there are cookbooks devoted to each one of these dishes. Food writer Molly Watson, for one, in her book Bowls, exclamation point, offers 26 full recipes for grain bowls, plus 90 more recipes for mix and match components. I hope by now you're not just hungry, but also curious enough to ask, what leftovers might I have on hand right now that I can reinvent into tomorrow's lunch? How can I transform this year's holiday turkey or ham? While you're eating your tasty creation to be, please think about some bigger questions that about how we can all pitch in to help make ours a more leftover friendly food culture so we can feed all those billions of extra people expected on the planet. So I'll conclude by sharing my top 3 wishes for using these 7 dishes to help engage our broader society in this mission. I'm sure you'll have ideas of your own, like ideas for all new policies, programs, and products. They each take the form of a wish. Here they come. Number 1, I wish that every child in America would learn how to transform their leftovers. In the past, children learned how to cook in their family's kitchen, helping out the parents and the grandparents in making family meals. Recipes were passed down from generation to generation. Memories were created as much as meals. Sadly, as we shift cooking responsibilities from mom and grandmom to takeout and out of home eateries, as a society, we are losing our cooking skills. We have a take our kids to work day, but perhaps we need a national teach our kids to cook day, built around the lofty goal of making sure every child in America graduates from high school knowing how to make at least one of these dishes as their lifetime go-to for their leftovers. My second wish is that every recipe published in America would come with tips for storing, reheating, and transforming what's left over. Who's better to help us understand how to best manage the leftovers than the food writers and chefs who developed the recipes? Thank you, Melissa Clark of the New York Times, for doing this in many of the recipes that you share. And my third wish, among many more, I wish that restaurants and cafeterias would insert tips for reheating and storage into every food delivery and doggy bag. Let's start by using up that valuable real estate that's on the inside cover of pizza boxes. As you can see on the left, Domino's in Australia already does this. What about the rest of us? So thank you for very much for listening and sharing any ideas you may have in this chat to help empower all of you to go forth, experiment, and enjoy. I prepared a free PDF of the recipes I mentioned during this presentation. To request a copy, simply go to the URL you see there, wehatetowaste.com/leftovers, and follow the instructions to get the free PDF and see the other resources that are up there for you. Now let's talk about any questions or comments you may have and how we can start to transform things that are right in your home, in your fridge now, or this holiday season.
Thank you so much, Jackie. Really appreciate that informative talk. And
Thank you,
not
Tiash.
just informative, but delicious talk.
Hope you're hungry, Tiash.
Yes, we are. We are. And just to quickly say, with your first wish, whenever we have soft bananas at home, my daughter does the banana breads.
Oh, I love it. That's a really wonderful recipe to start this process with kids.
Exactly.
It's
Yeah,
just so easy to make and so delicious.
exactly.
And as bananas ripen, they get more and more sweet. And
Yes.
so the blackest bananas are the sweetest of all.
And we hardly need to, like, we really half the sugar because the bananas are so sweet.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I did hear
Let's,
recently that it's better if you have a sugar problem actually to make sure you eat the green bananas rather than the black bananas because all those sugars have developed over the ripening
yep,
process. Just a
absolutely.
little, I'm always picking up little tidbits.
I have Duong saying she loves to make a leftover dessert with chopped up sweet and coconut milk.
Oh,
And
wonderful. Wonderful. Yeah,
and
coconut milk, I've learned a lot about how to use these days. I make my curries with coconut milk, and I never even knew about coconut milk in the past, but boy, is that a wonderful ingredient to work with.
yeah, that's one of the best. And
Ah,
I have Nancy who says, "Thank you so very much. Looking forward to my tuna, veggie, and grain bowl tomorrow."
hey, okay, enjoy that. Think of us when you're eating that.
Right. And just to let you know, I have a friend who's from France, and she gave me this tip of freezing anything bread and to be used later whenever. Just pop it into the oven and it's as good as fresh.
Absolutely. And in fact, kind of the opposite is true too. So if you have stale bread,
Mm-hmm.
don't throw it away. You
Oh,
can
yeah.
either,
Yep.
put it into
Croutons.
the processor and make breadcrumbs. You can make croutons from it, but you can also, you might have to figure it out a little bit to get the hang of it, but you can also kind of sprinkle it with water, and I think you have to put that in the oven to kind of steam it, and it will
Mm-hmm.
come back as fresh. Please, nobody ever throw away a crumb of bread.
Yep. Yep.
And as everybody knows, there are many, many recipes. I don't get into them here because I'm just focused on my 7 dishes. But
Absolutely.
whether it's French onion soup, lots of different dishes to use that the peoples of the world have developed to use up stale bread.
Yep.
Yeah,
Even pizza, I feel like when you have pizza one day, you don't feel like having pizza the next. But if you pop the pizza into the freezer and have it, let's say 1 week later, pop it into the oven, it's as good as new.
absolutely. I speaking of freezers, I just took out of I was making a meatloaf this evening, and I didn't realize that I didn't have any panko. I must have used it up. I usually had some panko in the freezer, but I did find 3 pieces of bread that I will admit I brought home from a restaurant. I take home the bread in the bread bowl, and I say, "Oh, wrap it up and please put in the bread too." Like, why not? You
Yep,
paid for it,
absolutely.
and otherwise
Yep,
it's going to go in the garbage. So why not enjoy it
absolutely.
later? So what I did, it was frozen, but I crushed it all up and I put it in the meatloaf, and it was fabulous.
Oh, I'm
I mean,
sure.
we all know about putting bread in the meatloaf, and it doesn't matter if it's stale; it will come back with the moisture that it will absorb from wherever it comes from.
Absolutely. I have beheld saying growing your own herbs on the windowsill is a great way to give new life to leftovers.
Absolutely, absolutely. I like to describe curry as the zingiest way to repurpose your leftovers. Any kind of spice or flavoring or condiment just rejuvenates things the next day. So nobody ever tell me leftovers are boring. If you tell me leftovers are boring, you don't know. You're not an imaginative enough cook. You're not a daring enough cook. You're not putting on those spices and condiments then.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, incidentally, curry powder exists only outside India. Did you know that?
I do. I wouldn't be surprised because um, the Indians, I think, pride themselves on blending their own fresh spices and making their own. This is what's so wonderful about curry is that you can uh, experiment with your own blends. And
Totally.
so you know, I don't think the Indians just kind of shake from a jar, but as I understand the history of curry powder is the English had curry and someone in England remembered the a taste of maybe one curry that was had a lot of turmeric and ginger in it and what have you, and tried to replicate it in England and said, "Oh, look at here's curry." And I have to say when we were first starting to research these different dishes, I think it took me about 3 weeks to realize there was a difference. Oh, wait a second. There's a curry the dish and curry the powder. It took me a little while to figure that out. It is a little confusing. And I think Americans are confused because they think that's some Americans think that's what curry tastes like is the curry powder. That's why I went out of my way a little bit to emphasize the garam masala and other spices.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Curry powder is totally, yeah. Yeah. Let's see if
So
we have
yeah,
any.
so are you look I can see the chat as well. I see the big stock pot out of turkey bones. Absolutely. Absolutely. And the collagen adds so many wonderful nutrients as well. Yeah.
I made a soup out of it for my friend who just gave birth, and she's like, "It's so good. Can I have the recipe?" I'm like, "I
Uh,
can't. It's just whatever I had left over, and I just put it through, and it's
absolutely.
like it's amazing."
I
But
keep all I keep a bag in my freezer of whatever I've kind of scraped off of the I like to cook. I scraped off of the cutting bowl, so a cutting board. You know, it could just be the ends of pizza. I mean, parsley or celery or the onion, even onion skins. I just drop it all in, and then I whatever bones I have, and I but it's so it's a different flavor, a little bit of different every single time, and it's always delicious.